Hello, and thank you for taking time to watch this video. I'll be the presenter for the session, and I thought it'd be good to put a voice to the flyer and say something insightful based on my own experiences, therefore original that you probably can't find online. And the first thing is, the university grades matter, but they don't matter as much as you think. For instance, if you got a 2-1 with 62% or 68%, the employer realistically is not going to know their percentage difference or count it in a big way. And even if you have a first instead of a 2-1, both will be invited for most roles to an interview. So in reality, at that point, the grade would count even less compared to your social skills and how you come across in the interview. And this is because at a certain level, people are employing for skills, but more so, they're looking for someone they think they can get along with and that fits into the team. And this cultural aspect is a lot bigger than most realize. And I think even the employers themselves are not fully aware of how big a role it plays. But it makes sense if you think about it, because we spend more time at work than we would our own family. So how everyone fits together into that team dynamic matters because ultimately it defines how happy people will be working together in their organization. And the person hiring you at the back of their mind, they are thinking, if I employ this person, how they perform reflects on me because I'm hiring them. Would they get along well with others in the business as part of my team? Say, for instance, if you're customer facing, and subconsciously, different people will be looking for different traits. Or put another way, the interview is not an exam. If you give a perfect robotic memorized answers where they can see you're thinking about the words as it's coming out, even if on paper that memorized answer would score you a 75% grade, it will probably leave a less positive impression compared to someone who comes across more naturally, a little bit more bubbly, a little bit more engaged, and the answer on paper would have only scored, let's say, 65%. So what I'm saying is, it's not just what you're saying that counts, it's how you're saying it, and ultimately how that connects or resonates with the interviewer that counts. The other reason why the grade isn't as important as you probably think is because as you progress in your career, the experience gets taken into account as well. What you do in the first 2 or 3 years, it really counts. For instance, if you have a first class degree, 3 years industry experience, quite a well known company, it's very competitive to get into, pays more than the average wage, but you just do what they ask you to do day in, day out. And that's been very similar for the last 2.5 years. And then you've got someone else, they've got a 2-2, 3 years industry experience, and they got into a less well-known company with an average wage, but they've gone above and beyond what was expected of them. They've worked really hard in their role, and they've got lots of achievements. So career-wise, after 3 years, if a new role appears paying 25% more, or the company goes broke and they need to find a new role straight away that pays the same or higher, the first class degree isn't competitive because the day-to-day work, despite doing it very well, is similar to what they were doing 2.5 years ago, and they can find another graduate of a similar caliber to where they were at to do it. Where the 2-2, because they're rolling up their sleeves, they're eager to help the company, they're looking to upskill, they can go anywhere. So for graduate schemes, it matters, but after that, if you're 3% off a 2-1 or first class, it's been 3 or 5 years. If you got the skills, they won't hold it against you. It's very much do you have a degree or don't you, and what have you done since then? So it's never really a case. If I get a job, then everything's complete. I'll be fulfilled and I can take it easy. There'll be no stress. And that's not true because in life, when you solve one problem, 5 others tend to pop up. And you're used to having an income, and because you're used to having an income, you have new habits and responsibilities compared to when you was younger. And this might be mortgage repayments, it could be more fancier rent repayments, it could be a family like kids. And you're also subject to new environment, and you might find it stressful because the people you're working with, you don't really like them. You might be doing a lot of long hours because they're giving you too much work and you're burning out and you shouldn't be doing that work, or something else might be happening in your life that means you really need a long break from working. But the issue is you have an income and you're used to having that income. So it's a lot worse now compared to when you was a student, 10 years looking for work. And that's why you've always got to think ahead, which is what we're doing at the moment by covering this. It's better to be aware now so you can get ahead of the curve than fall into these traps, which most will. And the opposite side to this is there's a market, and when you're in the market, you have a job, you'll notice jobs can pay different amounts. It could be 20,000, 30,000, 70,000, 80,000. So what type of job do you want and when do you want it by? And if you're not planning for this, big pay rises don't just fall into your lap, not like 30, 40%, which I frequently do. So the big picture is university, getting the degree, in my opinion, is not the real battle. The real battle only starts once you finish all of that studying and you're looking to convert all of the effort at school, college, and university into something tangible. I personally think one of the biggest misconceptions career-wise, not just graduate, even adults aren't aware of in terms of my insights, is that in the workplace it's really important to get along with the stakeholders. And I think this isn't always a good mentality to have. Sometimes you might like someone, but you try and get along with them because they're more senior, or the company has this, we've always worked this way, so you try and put up with it. And you do that so you don't have to worry about the stress of finding another job. And you think, you know what, they might help me out in the future. And the problem is, in the act of doing this and not trusting your own instincts, I think you're probably not on what you should have been on, and you become more reliant on the employer. So you're still opening up yourself to that sort of stress, or you end up disengaging with the employer a bit more. And in that act, you're actually just killing yourself because you haven't got that credit, that promotion, that little bit more money coming in, that little bit more senior title that meant you would have stood out more on the market if you're looking for new things. And the sad thing is, if you go externally, get what you believe you're worth, most times the company will match it because the cost of attrition, hiring someone new to replace you, is quite a lot because you hire them, you don't know how good they are. You have to allow for 3 to 6 months before you get the productivity back. You've got the costs in interviewing people, cost in onboarding. If you're using a recruitment agency, it's about 20% of their first year annual wages. So they won't tell you this because if 9 out of 10 deserve a big pay rise, you decline all of them. The one who does do it, then you can worry about matching it. So that's why I don't think, I need to get along with this person because they have more experience. They might be able to help me out. I thought I need to be able to help myself. So if internally I can't get a pay rise I want in the time span I want, or someone stressing me out, I can leave for better. So it's very much if they can do it, I need to be able to do things better than they do it. So it's not just about getting a job, but it's crafting out a career where you have the flexibility to move around if you need to. And you've always got to trust yourself and your own instincts. People in the workplace won't tell you that. If they tell you that, you're always going to be learning, you're always going to be improving, you're going to be getting pay rises more than they're on a lot quicker than it took them to get. And they're not going to have that. It's very much, it took me 20 years to get here. You're not going to get past me in 2 years, even if you're clever enough. And as I said, this is all my own insights. No one told me this. I just intuitively understood it, which is why I went around them externally and got things that I wanted and why I'm here presenting today. So, just to throw in a curveball, even with experience, it doesn't directly map to somewhere else, even for the same role. And that's because different organizations work in different ways. They have different requirements based on different strategies and different stages they're at with different systems. So generally, employers expect for someone new, it'll take about 3 to 6 months to settle in. So experience is more so how likely they are to adapt, but it can be overrated in a lot of instances as well. So I guess what I'm saying is, if you break it down, there are really 3 key points to being ahead of the curve career-wise. The first is you need a CV and a covering letter that stands out, that will get you invited to the interview. If you do that, you have a higher chance of getting the role, obviously. You also need to close the interview and get the job. Lots of interviews with no job offer. It's almost the same as not having had all of those interviews because it's the same end result. That's something you need to know how to handle. And you need to keep upskilling in your own time to stay ahead of the market. That gives you flexibility career-wise. You only have to put up with stress in the workplace, be worried about being out of work with a mortgage when you don't have a plan A, B, and C. People don't plan to fail, they fail to plan. So it's all about thinking ahead. And I started young, I've been thinking like this since I was in year 9 of secondary school. And because I'm always thinking 10 years ahead, even when I was at university, there's nothing really that can throw me out or catch me out too much compared to other people. If I can work out what a worst case scenario is, why it might occur, and I have time to deal with it years beforehand, then it can't become a major problem. So I'm a problem solver where it counts, and I know I'm always running a marathon and it's not a sprint. Thank you for having a listen. If I get an email from yourselves when a session is booked, I'll email the details as per point two on the flyer. And in the more formal session, we can cover creating cover letters that give a custom feel without being fully customized, but not letting the employer know that. And at a graduate level, I think it's a must. We can really dissect and create outstanding CV using angles and design ideas that took me 4 or 5 years, or maybe even longer to think about. And I'm sure you haven't had the years I have had to think about this, and it will give you a tremendous advantage. I'll give you experiences of how I handle interviews, and that's really interesting because as part of these interviews, sometimes I've done over 60 or 70, but there's been the odd few where I've talked myself from 42k to £400 a day, and some of those skills I think are transferable. We'll talk about how to effectively utilize social media platforms like LinkedIn, discuss internships, how to showcase skills, and ideas that overlap to all sectors, as well as answer any burning questions or ideas that you may have. And this is actually my favorite part of the session because it has a problem solving aspect. So it's really a one in the type session. You've got to ask yourself 3 questions, in my opinion. The first is, when will be the next time you'll find someone this experienced with a range of insights to offer? Because everything I'm saying is not researched, it's all based on my own life experiences and how I interpret things happening around me. The second is, how much is the session really worth to you? And how much should others be charging in reverse? Because I've seen others charge hundreds for an hour where it's a one-to-one and that's the full-time job, and they wouldn't even be current and able to get a job in the current market because times have moved. Where for me, if it's the graduate level, I know the same principle applies to all because you're all in the same boat. So I don't think they would be as capable as I am on the market. And the other thing for me is this isn't a full-time job. I've got other things I enjoy doing more than just interview advice, tactics, CV and covering letter and so forth. Lastly, what's the disadvantage to these sessions is what I think about, and I personally think there is none. I think I'm very reasonable with regards to the services being offered. And the reason why I believe these sessions can work so strongly is because I'm only in one place at one time. So let's say I created a video, the CV stuff, everything I think and have thought of to date, put it all online. There's a million graduates per year. They all watched it. And if you all have exactly the same material, there's no big real advantage because the advantage I could have given has been equaled and there's still only a certain number of roles available. But if I'm only in one place at one time, I don't share what I teach publicly or create, which I don't, then others can't copy it. And it's the not sharing, even the small things like CV ideas, design ideas that I come up with publicly that will give you the advantage because recruiters have so many applications coming to them, they're not going to be proactively looking at this level to poach people based on public profiles. They do it at a higher level where they get bigger commission and it's hard to find people on the market with skills. But the other people who are competing and trying to get jobs, if your stuff is public, they'll see it, they can understand it, they can copy part of the idea, and you'll actually be giving an unknown amount a smaller advantage that they shouldn't have at your expense. And at the graduate level, unfortunately, the reality is you're competing against each other. So as soon as they get your first role, you should be focusing on how you're going to progress, create resilience, and so forth. So if you can take what I say, adapt it, make it work for you, it's a massive advantage. I also think there's a certain level of confidence you get from an in-person event lasting a couple of hours, which has a layer of customization based on the questions that you ask, which can't be underestimated. And I'll also review point four as per on the flyer. You shouldn't be able to find this link without the flyer. So if you do, just to make you aware, these sessions are specifically aimed at graduates who are looking to progress or break into a career, which are run in Birmingham, UK, and they are group sessions. I do offer professional services on a one-to-one basis, but this is tailored and it depends on what ways you want to get to and the ways you're at relative to where you're at, obviously. So, for instance, if you're on 25 to 35 and you're looking to get 35 to 50 or 35 to 50, 50 to 62 and so forth, the tricks that I have and the experience I can give you where you might not have ever been able to interview at this level before or make an application, you'll get a bigger return. So my cost is slightly higher. And there's also a limited number of spots because, as I said before, I have other things I like to work on. But if you put in the subject line, ways you want to get to as a bracket, I'll know to separate it out. And I mainly specialize in data roles for those one-to-one sessions and higher bands. So I hope you have a lovely day and hope I get to see some of you in person. And thank you again.